The sedan chair lurched to a halt. I pressed my palm flat against the cold jade bracelet on my wrist, a wedding gift from my mother-in-law, the Dowager Duchess, 12 years ago. 12 years, 6 sons, and one husband who had not set foot in my courtyard in 843 days. Madam. My maid, Chuanxiang, lifted the curtain, her face pale. His Grace has brought Lady Lu back. She's in the main hall, with a child. A child. I stepped down. My embroidered shoes touched the snow, and I felt nothing. Not cold. Not anger. Not the hollow ache that had lived in my chest since the year I gave birth to my 4th son, bleeding alone, while my husband rode to the western frontier to retrieve his cousin's orphan sister, the same Lady Lu who now sat in my seat, draped in cloud-patterned silk, her belly flat, her hand resting on a boy of about 5. Sister, she rose, her voice honeyed and thin. I have returned to serve you. This is your husband's eldest son. Eldest. I looked at my 6, all standing in a trembling line by the pillars. My eldest, 12, with his father's brow. My youngest, barely 2, held by my 2nd son, his little face smudged with the ash from the brazier I had been tending this morning. My husband, the Duke of Anping, strode in from the eastern corridor.
He did not look at me.
He looked at Lady Lu, and his voice softened in a way I had not heard in a decade. She has been wronged enough. From today, she resides in the fragrant courtyard. My fingers curled into my palm, the jade bracelet bit into my wrist. 12 years. I had birthed 6 sons for this house. I had sold my dowry's finest paintings to pay for the army supplies when the northern border fell. I had knelt in the ancestral hall for 3 days to beg forgiveness for my 3rd son, who had broken a vase that was already cracked, a vase his father never even remembered. And now I looked at Lady Lu's boy, and I saw my husband's jaw, my husband's eyes, my husband's sneer. The boy smiled. It was a practiced, vicious smile. Mother, my eldest whispered, stepping forward, his voice cracking. Let me. I raised my hand.
He stopped.
I turned to my husband. Your Grace. My voice did not shake. You brought her in. You named her child your eldest. Then tell me, are my 6 sons your heirs, or are they obstacles? The hall went silent. The Duke's face flickered, surprise, then fury. But Lady Lu's hand flew to her chest, and the boy began to cry, and in that moment, I saw it clearly. I was not a wife. I was a nurse, a cash box, a shield for his reputation, and I had been blind for 12 years. That was the day I stopped being the Duchess of Anping. That was the day I began to count. The snow melted, the plum trees bloomed, and I opened the small lacquered chest hidden beneath the floorboard of my bedchamber. Inside, 300 taels I had saved from the household accounts, a deed to a shop in the Eastern Market recorded under my maiden name, and a letter from the Empress Dowager's head lady-in-waiting, dated 6 years ago, inviting me to the palace for a private audience. I had never gone. I had been pregnant with my 5th, and my husband had said, stay. The household needs you. I had stayed. I had built this household, brick by brick, servant by servant, alliance by alliance. Every steward owed me a favor. Every concubine's maid reported to me. Every grain of rice, every bolt of silk, every gold ingot that passed through these gates. I had touched it, weighed it, counted it. But I had never counted myself. Now I sat with my 6 sons in my private study. The door was bolted. The brazier glowed low. Listen to me, I said, looking each of them in the eye. Your father has brought a viper into this house. That viper has a son who wants your titles, your lands, your very breath. I will not let him take anything from you, but I cannot do it as a dutiful wife. I have been dutiful for 12 years. Now I will be clever. My 2nd son, the scholar, pushed his glasses up his nose. Mother, what are you planning? I smiled. It was not a warm smile. I am going to make this house so rich, so powerful, that your father will have to kneel to me. And when he kneels, I will make him choose his side piece, or his survival. They stared. My 3rd son, the warrior in training, cracked his knuckles. I'll break his knees. No, I said. We'll break his accounts. That night, I wrote 3 letters. One to the Empress Dowager's lady, accepting the long-delayed audience. One to the head of the Jiangnan Silk Guild, my father's old trading partner, who owed my family a debt of honor. And one to my mother-in-law, the Dowager Duchess, who had retired to the Buddhist temple on the southern hill. She had always favored me, though she never said it aloud. She had seen her own husband favor a concubine and destroy his legacy. She would understand. I sealed the 3rd letter with a single drop of red wax. No chop, no name. Just the faint impression of a plum blossom, the mark I used to press into my son's sweets when they were small, so they would know which treats were safe. The dowager would know. By dawn, the servants had been redistributed. The eastern storeroom was inventoried. And Lady Lu, in her fragrant courtyard, found that her prized peony garden had been accidentally watered with brine, a mistake, of course, by the new gardener I had hired the day before. She screamed. I heard it from across the garden. I drank my tea and said nothing. My 6th son, the toddler, crawled into my lap. Mother, he babbled. Smell flowers. Soon, I told him, stroking his hair. Soon we'll plant our own garden, and no one will ever salt it again. But I knew the battle had only just begun. Lady Lu was not a fool. She had waited 5 years to bring that boy into this house. She had bribed the midwives, forged the birth records, and convinced my husband that I had been too busy with the other 6 to notice. She was right. I had been too busy. But I was busy no longer. The first move, I uncovered the embezzlement in the household grain accounts, 3,000 taels siphoned over 8 years, all signed off by the very steward who now served Lady Lu her morning porridge. I did not confront him. I sent copies of the ledgers to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, anonymous, with a note. The Duke of Anping's granary is lighter than his conscience. By noon, the steward was arrested. By nightfall, Lady Lu's personal maid was seen burning documents in the courtyard brazier. I watched from my window. The smoke curled up like a gray serpent. My eldest son stood behind me. Mother, she's destroying evidence. Let her, I said. She is not the one I want to catch. I wanted the man who signed the ledgers. I wanted the official who looked the other way. I wanted my husband's blind eye and his weak heart and his utter, complete underestimation of the woman who had borne him 6 sons and never once asked for a single thing for herself. Until now. That night, I walked to the fragrant courtyard. Lady Lu stood at the gate, her face pale, her son clinging to her skirts. Sister, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what you think you're doing. I'm doing what you did, I said quietly. I'm protecting my children. She stepped back. Her son began to cry. I won't hurt him, I said, and I meant it. He's just a boy. He didn't choose this. But you chose to steal a place that was never yours. You chose to lie. You chose to turn my husband against me, not because you loved him, but because you wanted his name. Her face crumpled. You have 6 sons. I have only 1. And he is his father's. He is a child. I cut her off. So, I will not harm him. But I will take everything else from you. Every servant. Every coin. Every scrap of dignity you've stolen from my children's future. You will leave this house with nothing, or you will leave it with your son's inheritance intact, if you leave now and never return. She stared at me. For a long moment, I saw calculation flicker in her eyes. Then she laughed. A brittle, desperate laugh. You think he will let me go? Your husband? He loves me. He loves my son. He will never. He will love his own skin more, I said. Wait and see. 3 days later, the ministry's investigation reached the Duke. The grain accounts, the missing taxes, the bribes he had accepted to keep the northern garrison understaffed while his own estate swelled. He came to me, late at night. His face was haggard. You did this, he said. I did not deny it. I can fix it, he said. I can pay back the silver. I can punish the steward. You can send Lady Lu and her son to the southern estate, I said. You can sign over half your land to my eldest son's name, today. And you can write a letter to the Empress Dowager, thanking her for her kind attention to your household. A letter I will deliver myself when I meet with her tomorrow." His face went white. You're meeting the Empress Dowager?" "She invited me 6 years ago," I said. "I was too busy raising your sons to go. But I'm not busy anymore." He fell silent. Then slowly he dropped to his knees. I did not help him up. That night, I wrote a new deed. My name, my sons' names, the house, the lands, the shops, the silk trade, all of it was still his by title, but the weight, the management, the future, that was mine. I had not forgiven him. I would not forgive him. But I had learned something in 12 years of being invisible. A woman who controls the money controls the house. And a woman who controls the house can reshape it from the ground up. By dawn, Lady Lu's carriage rolled out the eastern gate. She did not look back. Her son waved from the window, confused, innocent. I stood on the steps with my 6 sons. My second son handed me a cup of tea. "Mother," he said quietly, "what happens now?" I took the cup. The steam curled, warm and clean. "Now," I said, "we build something that no one can take from us." I looked down the long stone path. I have an audience with the Empress Dowager at noon. After that, I have a meeting with the Silk Guild. And after that, I have a new name for this estate. "What name?" my youngest lisped. I smiled, and this time, it reached my eyes. "We are no longer the Omping household," I said. "We are the Phoenix Gate. And phoenixes do not bow." The snow had melted. The plum blossoms had fallen. And for the first time in 12 years, I did not feel like a wife. I felt like a beginning. I did not know what the future held. But I knew this. I would not be taken by surprise again. Every merchant, every minister, every maid and guard, they would all know my face. They would all know my sons. And they would all remember the day the Duchess of Onping stood in the snow and chose herself. I had been given nothing but a title and a cage. But I had built 6 sons, a fortune, and a spine of iron. And I was just getting started. The Phoenix Gate rose from the ashes of the Onping household, but ash clings to the souls of even the most determined walker. I learned that truth on the morning of my audience with the Empress Dowager, when I stepped into the palace and found the corridors lined with women who had heard the rumors. The Duchess who had exiled her husband's favorite, the mother of 6 who had turned the grain accounts inside out, the daughter-in-law who had written to the Dowager with a plum blossom seal. They stared. I stared back. I had spent 12 years learning to be invisible. Now I learned to be visible, and it burned like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. The Empress Dowager received me in her private garden, not the main hall. A deliberate choice. She wanted to see me, without the scaffolding of ceremony. She sat by a koi pond, feeding the fish with thin fingers, her white hair pinned with a single jade hairpin, the same shade as the bracelet she had given me on my wedding day. "You came," she said, not looking up. I waited 6 years. I knelt. The stone was cold through my silk. "I was a fool, Your Highness." "No," she tossed a crumb. The koi surged, red and gold. "You are a wife. There is a difference. A fool repeats her mistakes. A wife simply makes them once, very thoroughly, and then decides whether to keep making them." She turned to me then, and her eyes were sharp as broken shells. "You decided to stop. I decided to protect my sons." She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had buried 3 husbands and outlived 2 emperors. "Good. Then let me tell you what your husband did not. The grain accounts were only the surface. Beneath them, your duke has been selling military procurement contracts to the southern merchants for 7 years. He takes a cut. The garrisons get moldy rice and rusted blades. And the ministry has been looking for someone to pin it on. They have found your steward, but they want your husband." My throat went dry. "Your Highness, I am telling you this because you are no longer his wife in any meaningful sense. You are the mother of 6 heirs to a dukedom that is about to collapse. If he falls, your sons fall, unless you have already built something separate." I met her gaze. "I have." She nodded slowly. "Then build faster. The ministry will move within the month. They will arrest him, confiscate the estates, and leave your sons with nothing but their names, unless you can prove that the assets of the Phoenix Gate are yours alone, earned before and during your marriage, separate from his corruption. I had the deed. I had the shop. I had 300 taels. But I would need more. Much more. I left the palace with a scroll in my sleeve, a formal acknowledgement from the Empress Dowager herself, recognizing my separate property rights under the old laws. It was a weapon. But weapons need sharpening. The Jiangnan Silk Guild met me in a tea-house on the eastern edge of the capital, far from the prying eyes of the Anping retainers. The head of the guild was a man named Master Wei, a round-bellied, soft-voiced merchant who had once been my father's second cousin by marriage. He remembered me as a child, sitting on my father's knee while he negotiated bolt prices. He did not recognize the woman who walked into his private room, dressed in widow's gray, carrying a ledger of her own making. "Lady he said, using my maiden name with careful precision. "Your letter said you had a proposition." I opened the ledger. On its pages, I had mapped the entire silk supply chain of the capital, every workshop, every dye house, every broker who took a cut between the weaver and the seamstress. It was a tangle of inefficiencies and kickbacks. I had spent 12 years watching it from the inside, while my husband collected rents from the workshops and never once asked where the silk actually came from. "Master Wei," I said, "I can give you the Easter market. All of it. The Duke owns the storefronts, but I own the leases, the supplier relationships, and the loyalty of every forewoman in every workshop. I have been paying their wages out of my own allowance for 5 years. They will follow me." He leaned back. "And what do you want in return?" "A partnership. Not a sale. You provide the capital to expand the workshops. I provide the labor, the connections, and the protection of the Empress Dowager's seal. We split the profits 60-40, 60 to me, for the first 3 years. After that, we renegotiate." He laughed. 60? "Lady that is robbery." "No," I said. "That is what you owe my father for the debt you never repaid. He lent you 5,000 taels when your dye house burned in the Great Fire of 39. You promised him half your business. He died before you could deliver. I am his heir, and I am collecting." His face went still. I had him, and he knew it. 3 days later, the first shipment of new silk left the eastern workshops, marked with a phoenix and plum blossom seal. My youngest son had designed it himself, with charcoal sticks and too much enthusiasm. I had it embroidered onto every bolt. Let them see. Let them know. Meanwhile, in the Anping Manor, now the Phoenix Gate, though the signs had not yet been changed, my husband paced his study like a caged wolf. The ministry had not yet moved, but the threat hung over him. He had sent 3 letters to Lady Lu in the southern estate. She had not replied. I knew this because I had intercepted the letters and burned them. He did not know this. He still believed she was waiting for him, loyal, patient, ready to return. He came to me on the 6th night after my audience. He looked thinner, older. The arrogance had curdled into something like desperation. "You spoke to the Empress Dowager," he said. "What did she tell you?" I was brushing my hair. The mirror reflected his haggard face behind me. "She told me that you have 7 years of corruption to answer for." He flinched. "I can fix it. I have allies." You have nothing," I said, setting the brush down. "Your allies are already distancing themselves. Your steward is in prison. Your concubine has stopped answering your letters. Your sons are learning to sign their own names on business contracts. And I have a separate estate, recognized by the palace, that your debts cannot touch." He stepped forward. "You would let me fall? After 12 years of marriage? After 6 sons? You let me bleed alone in childbirth," I said, turning to face him. "You let me kneel in the ancestral hall for a broken vase that had been cracked since before I arrived. You brought another woman into my house and called her child your eldest. You did all of this, and you never once asked how I felt. So yes, I will let you fall. But I will not let you take my sons with you." He sank into a chair. I had never seen him look so small. "What do you want?" I stood. "I want you to write a confession." "What?" "A confession," addressed to the ministry, admitting to the procurement fraud but naming the southern merchants as the primary instigators. You will say you were coerced. You will say you have already repaid the missing funds from your personal accounts, which I will provide, out of my new silk profits, on the condition that you sign over the remaining half of the Onping lands to our eldest son. You will be demoted, fined, and stripped of your titles, but you will not go to prison. And you will live, quietly, in a small house on the southern edge of the city, with a small allowance, supervised by your sons.
He stared at me.
You want me to become a prisoner in my own city. I want you to become a footnote, I said. That is more than you deserve. He wrote the confession that night. I watched his hand shake as he signed his name. The Duke of Onping, reduced to ink and paper. I sealed it with my own plum blossom wax and sent it to the ministry before dawn. By noon, the arrest order had been quietly rescinded. By evening, the southern merchants were being rounded up. And by midnight, I sat in the study that had once been his, with 6 sons asleep in their rooms and a stack of deeds that bore only one name. Mine. The Phoenix Gate had risen, but outside the gate, I knew, other wolves were gathering. The Duke had allies. Lady Lu had her own patrons. And the Empress Dowager's favor, like all favors, could be withdrawn. I had won the first battle, but I had not won the war. I would need to build, and keep building, until the Phoenix Gate was not just a house but a fortress. That I looked at the brazier. The confession had already been sent. The silk shipments would leave at dawn. And my sons, my 6 sons, would wake tomorrow to a mother who had finally learned to say no. I smiled, and I meant it. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the old footprints of the Duke and his concubine. I watched it from the window, and I thought, let them come. Let them all come. I have nothing left to lose and everything to build. The Phoenix Gate does not bow, and neither do I. The snow melted twice more before the first wolf came to my door. I knew he would come. I had counted the days since the ministry's investigation closed, and I had watched the southern merchants' assets being auctioned off, piece by piece. Someone would want revenge. Someone always did. His name was Lord Chen, a man with a thin mustache and thinner patience. He arrived on a cloudy morning, flanked by 2 servants who carried a red lacquer box between them. The box was heavy. I could tell by the way they strained. He presented it to me in the main hall, where the old Onping banners had been taken down and replaced with phoenix and plum embroidery. He did not kneel. He did not bow. He simply set the box before me and said, "A gift, Lady He. From an admirer." I did not open it. What admirer? One who has heard of your transformation. One who believes you would be an asset to a larger enterprise. He smiled, but his eyes were flat. The silk trade is well and good, but the real money lies in salt. And salt, Lady He, is a dangerous game. I had heard the rumors. Salt was controlled by a cartel of northern lords, all connected to the military, all hungry for new partners who could launder their profits through legitimate businesses. They had been eyeing the Silk Guild for months, hoping to buy their way into the Easter market. Master Wei had warned me. I had not listened as carefully as I should have. Now Lord Chun was here, and he was offering a partnership that was not really a partnership. It was a takeover disguised as a favor. I signaled Chuanxiang to bring tea. She moved quietly, her face a mask of calm. I had trained her well. "Lord Chun," I said, "the silk trade is all I know. I am a simple merchant with a few storefronts and a fortunate connection to the palace. I do not have the appetite for salt."
He laughed.
"You are anything but simple, Lady He. You outmaneuvered your husband's concubine, and the entire Ministry of Internal Affairs. You have the Empress Dowager's seal and the loyalty of 6 sons. You are exactly the sort of woman who should be playing a larger game." And if I refuse, he reached into his sleeve and withdrew a folded paper. He placed it on the table beside the box. "Then I will have to share some unfortunate news with the palace. News about the source of your silk. News about a certain dye house that was never properly registered under your father's name. News about taxes that were paid late or not at all in the years before your marriage." My blood went cold. The dye house. My father's old dye house. I had inherited it through a verbal agreement. never formalized, never recorded. If Lord Chun had the documents to prove it was never legally transferred, he could claim it was forfeit to the state. And with it half my silk supply. I had been so careful with the future. I had forgotten to protect the past, and I picked up the paper and read it. It was a letter from a now-deceased clerk of the Ministry of Commerce, stating that the dye house had been declared abandoned in the year of my father's death. The clerk had been paid to forge the declaration. The forger's name was not on the letter, but Lord Chen's name was on the bottom as the current holder of the debt. "You bought the debt," I said quietly. "I bought the proof, and I will be happy to sell it to you for a price. A share in your silk business, 20%, and a promise that when I ask for salt distribution in the Easter market, you will not object." I set the paper down. "And if I do not agree," he stood, "then I will send this letter to the Empress Dowager's office by noon tomorrow, and you will watch your Phoenix Gate crumble." He left the box. He left the paper. He left me sitting in my own hall, staring at the two objects that could undo everything that I opened the box that night, alone in my study. Inside was a small jade pendant, carved in the shape of a salt crystal. A warning. A reminder that the Northern Lords were watching, and they had long memories. My eldest son came in while I was still holding the pendant. He was tall now, almost as tall as his father, but with none of his father's cruelty. "Mother, I heard Lord Chun came today. What did he want?" I told him. He listened without interruption, his jaw tight. When I finished, he said, "Then we find his weakness. Everyone has one." He was 12 years old. He should have been memorizing poetry and chasing butterflies. Instead, he was learning to fight lords and merchants. I felt a sharp twist of guilt and pride. "You are right," I said, "but we need to move carefully. Lord Chin is not like your father. He is not vain. He is not careless. He is a professional." "Then we need a professional too," my son said. "What about Master Wei? He knows everyone in the merchant world. If anyone can find dirt on Lord Chun, it's him." I sent for Master Wei the next morning. He arrived with a basket of lychees and a wary expression. "Lady he said, "I heard Lord Chun visited. I also heard he left a box. You did not open it, I hope." "I opened it." He sighed. "Then you know about the salt cartel. I was going to warn you. I was going to send a letter." "I know," I said. "But I need more than warnings. I need leverage." He set the basket down. "Lord Chun is not a simple man. He has allies in the ministry. He has family connections to the Northern General. He has a wife from the Zhao clan, and the Zhao clan controls half the grain supply in the capital. If you move against him, you move against a web. And that web," I said slowly, "is exactly what I need to understand. Where does it have weak points?" Master Wei was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "His wife." I blinked. "His wife, she despises him. She hates the salt trade, the Northern Lords, the constant moving. She wanted to live in the capital, among poets and scholars. He dragged her to the northern border for 5 years. She has not forgiven him. If you can reach her, if you can offer her something he cannot, you may find an ally in her chambers." It was risky, dangerous. But I had no other path that night. I wrote a letter to Lady Zhao, Lord Chen's wife. I did not mention Lord Chen. I did not mention salt. I simply invited her to a tea tasting at the Phoenix Gate, hosted by the woman who had recently taken an interest in calligraphy and poetry. I enclosed a small inkstone, a gift, I wrote, from one woman of letters to another.
2 days later, she arrived.
She was younger than I expected, with tired eyes and a beautiful silk gown that seemed to hang on her frame. She looked around my hall with barely concealed longing, taking in the embroidery, the scrolls, the clean lines of the furniture. She saw what I had built. She saw what she did not have. We drank tea. We talked about poetry. We mentioned nothing of salt or husbands. But when she left, she pressed my hand and whispered, "Lord Chin keeps his documents in a locked chest in his study. He has a key on a chain around his neck. But he has a second key, hidden in the hollow of his favorite brush. I know this because I watched him hide it, thinking I was asleep." She smiled. It was a hollow smile. Use it well, Lady Heath. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sent my third son, the warrior in training, the one with the quickest hands, to Lord Chen's private residence. He knew what to do. He had been practicing his lockpicking on the pantry doors for months, though I had pretended not to notice. He returned before dawn, his hands empty but his eyes bright. "Mother," he said, "I did not take anything, but I saw the documents. They are as you suspected, ledgers, names, dates. And one more thing, a letter from the Empress Dowager's own secretary, dated 3 years ago, promising Lord Chen a favor in exchange for a contribution to the palace renovations. It is not signed by her, but it is signed by her secretary, and that is enough to cause a scandal." I felt the breath leave my lungs. The Empress Dowager's secretary, the same woman who had helped me secure my separate property rights. If Lord Chen had leverage over her, he had leverage over the palace itself. That was why he was so confident I could not expose him without exposing her. But if I could not expose him, I could not defeat him. Unless I made him an offer he could not refuse. I wrote another letter. This one was not to Lady Zhao. This one was to Lord Chen himself. I wrote, "I will give you 10% of my silk business.
No salt. No partnership.
Just 10%, paid quarterly, in exchange for your silence and the return of the dye house documents. I will also provide you with a personal guarantee that I will never investigate the source of your salt profits. In return, you will leave the Phoenix Gate alone. Forever." I knew it was a gamble. He might refuse. He might demand more. But I also knew that his wife had given me his key. And a man who keeps 2 keys is a man who fears betrayal. He responded by noon. His letter was brief. Accepted. The documents will be returned by sundown. And Lady He, you are a worthy opponent. I hope we never meet again. I burned his letter in the brazier. I did not celebrate. I did not relax. I simply sat in my study, looking at the empty box where the jade pendant had been, and I thought, 10% is a small price to pay for survival. But I will find a way to earn it back. I will find a way to make him pay, slowly, over time, without ever lifting a finger against him directly. That is how you win in this world. You never strike. You simply outlast. I looked at the snow outside my window, falling again, soft and silent. I thought of my sons, asleep in their beds, safe for another night. I thought of Lady Zhao, trapped in a marriage she despised. I thought of the Empress Dowager, whose secretary had made a deal that could bring down a dynasty, and I thought, I am not the wolf. I am not the sheep. I am the gate. And gates do not break. Spring arrived with a vengeance, bringing rain that turned the capital streets to mud and the Phoenix Gates gardens to a riot of peonies. I stood at my window, watching the petals bend under the downpour, and I thought of Lady Lu. She had been gone for 3 months. I had not heard from her, and I had not wanted to. But that morning, a messenger arrived with a sealed letter bearing the mark of the Southern estate. I opened it with steady hands. "Sister," the letter began, "I am dying. Please come." The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I did not believe her at first. I had learned not to believe anyone. But I also remembered the little boy who had waved from the carriage window, confused and innocent. He was not his mother's sins. He was just a child. I traveled south for 3 days, leaving my eldest in charge of the Phoenix Gate, with strict instructions to consult Master Wei before making any decision of consequence. My second son, the scholar, insisted on accompanying me. He carried a small satchel of medicines and a book on southern herbs. I did not ask where he had acquired them. I was learning not to ask too many questions. Lady Lu's estate was smaller than I remembered, a crumbling country house with peeling paint and a garden that had gone to weeds. She met me in the main hall, and I barely recognized her. She had lost weight. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were hollow, and her hands trembled as she offered me tea. "You came," she whispered. "I did not think you would." "You said you were dying," I replied. I wanted to see if it was true. She laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "It is. The doctors say it is a wasting sickness. They give me 2 months, perhaps 3. I've spent them writing letters to your husband, the Duke, begging him to take our son. He has not replied. He has not even acknowledged the boy's existence. I set the tea down. He is no longer the Duke of Anping. He lives in a small house on the southern edge of the city, with a small allowance and no power. He does not reply to anyone. Her face crumpled. Then my son will be orphaned. He has no one else. His father, your husband's son, whatever you may think, has no one left to care for him. I have no relatives. I have no money. I have nothing but a dying body and a terrified child. I looked at her for a long moment. I had hated her once. I had hated her with a cold, quiet fury that had frozen my heart for 12 years. But standing there, watching her crumble into dust, I felt something else. Not forgiveness. Not pity. Just recognition. She had made terrible choices, but she had made them out of the same desperation I had once felt. The desperation of a woman with no power and no future. "Where is the boy?" I asked. She pointed to the eastern wing. "He hides in his room. He is afraid of everyone now. He was afraid of you, even before he knew who you were. I told him you were a kind woman. I lied." I did not answer. I walked to the eastern wing and pushed the door open. The boy was sitting on a narrow bed, clutching a wooden horse that had been carved with uneven hands. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes widened with fear. I sat down on the floor across from him. I did not reach out. I did not speak. I simply sat, as I had sat with my own sons when they were small and frightened, waiting for them to come to me. He did not come, but he stopped shaking. After a long silence, I said, "Your mother is very sick." He nodded, his eyes wet. "I am going to take you to the capital. You will live with me and my 6 sons. You will have a room, a bed, and food. You will not be treated poorly. You will not be called names. You will be given a chance to become something other than what your mother and father made you. Do you understand?" He stared at me. "You won't hurt me." "No," I said. "I will not hurt you. I have never hurt any child. And I will not start with you." He put the wooden horse down. He walked to me slowly, one step at a time, and he put his small hand in mine. His fingers were cold and thin. I closed my own hand around them and held tight. Lady Lu died 3 days later. I held her hand as she passed, her breath rattling in her chest, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. She did not speak. She did not ask for forgiveness. She simply let go, and I let her. I took her son to the capital. I rode in the same carriage that had once carried her away from the Phoenix Gate. The boy sat across from me, silent and watchful. My second son sat beside him, reading from his book of southern herbs, occasionally offering a quiet comment about the flowers we passed. The boy did not respond, but he listened. When we arrived at the Phoenix Gate, my sons were waiting in the courtyard. They had heard about the boy. They had heard about Lady Lu. And they had come to see for themselves. My eldest stepped forward. He looked at the boy, then at me. "Mother," he said, "is this the one?" "This is your brother," I said. "His name is Lu Yuan. He will live here from now on. He will be treated as one of us. If any of you raises a hand to him, you will answer to me. If any of you speaks a cruel word, you will answer to me. He is not his mother's sins. He is a child. And we are the Phoenix Gate. We do not turn away children." My sons looked at each other. Then my third son, the warrior, stepped forward and held out his hand. "I am the third," he said. "I will teach you how to fight, if you want." Lu Yuan took his hand. He did not smile. But he did not run. That night, I sat in my study and wrote a new letter. This one was to the Empress Dowager's secretary, the same woman who had once helped me and whom I had almost exposed to Lord Chen's scheme. I wrote, "I have taken in the son of Lady Lu. He is not a threat. He is not a pawn. He is a child. I do not know what you think of this, but I want you to know that I will not use him against anyone. He will be raised as my own, and he will be given every opportunity to become a good man. You have my word." I sealed the letter with the plum blossom wax and sent it before dawn. The response came 3 days later. It was brief, written in the secretary's own hand. "I believe you, and I am grateful. You have shown mercy to a boy who did not choose his birth. That is not weakness. That is strength. I will remember it. I folded the letter and put it in the lacquered chest beneath my floorboard, alongside the deed, the tale, and the Empress Dowager's original invitation. I had come so far. I had won so much. But the most important thing I had won, I realized, was not the silk trade or the property rights or the favor of the powerful. It was the trust of a dying woman, the love of a frightened child, and the loyalty of 6 sons who had watched their mother become something new. I walked to the nursery, where Lu Yuan was sleeping in a small bed beside my youngest. They were both curled under the same quilt, their faces peaceful and young. I stood in the doorway and watched them breathe. In and out. In and out. I thought of Lady Lu. I thought of her letter, her trembling hands, her hollow eyes. She had been my enemy. She had been my rival. But in the end, she had been nothing more than a woman who wanted her son to survive. And I had given her that. Not because I forgave her. Not because I had forgotten the years of pain she caused. But because I had learned that the only way to break a cycle is to refuse to continue it. I closed the door quietly and walked back to my study. The rain had stopped. The moon was rising, pale and silver. I sat at my desk and began to write a new plan, a plan to expand the silk trade to the southern ports, a plan to train Lu Yuan in the business alongside my own sons, a plan to ensure that the Phoenix Gate would outlast me and my children and their children after them, that I did not know if I could succeed. I did not know if the future would be kind. But I knew one thing for certain. I had started something that no one could undo. I had built a family out of broken pieces. And I would not let anyone shatter it again. The gate stands. The phoenix rises. And the woman who once knelt in the snow, invisible and forgotten, has become the wind beneath their wings. Summer came with scorching heat, and the capital sweltered under a sun that seemed determined to bake the very stones. I sat in my study with the windows thrown wide, watching the dust rise from the street below. The Phoenix Gate had grown. The silk business had expanded to 3 new workshops, and the southern port contract I had negotiated with Masterway was bringing in gold faster than I could count. But success breeds envy, and envy breeds trouble. I had been expecting it. I had not expected it to come from inside my own walls. My second son, the scholar, had always been quiet. He spent his days buried in books, his nights writing poetry. I had assumed he was content. I had assumed he was safe. But on the 15th day of the 6th month, he came to me with a letter in his trembling hand. "Mother," he said, "I have been offered a position at the Imperial Academy." I took the letter. It was written on heavy paper, stamped with the Academy's seal. It was an invitation, no, a summons, for him to join the ranks of the Imperial Scholars. It was an honor beyond anything I had dared to hope for. But I saw the fear in his eyes, and I knew the offer was not what it seemed. "Who sent this?" I asked. He hesitated. "Lord Chen." The name hit me like a blow. Lord Chen. The man I had made a deal with. The man I had paid 10% of my silk business to leave me alone. He had not kept his word. He had found a new way to strike, and he had used my son. "Does he know about our arrangement?" I asked. "I don't know. He didn't mention it. He just said he had been impressed by my essays and wanted to recommend me for a position. He said it would be a great opportunity for the family. He said I could bring honor to the Phoenix Gate." I sat down heavily. "My son, Lord Chun, is not a benefactor. He is a serpent. He has not forgotten our deal. He is using you to get to me. If you accept this position, you will be under his thumb. He will control your career, your reputation, your future. And he will use that control to demand more from me, more silk, more influence, more of everything I have built." My son looked at me. I had never seen him so conflicted. "But mother," he said, "what if I refuse? What if I turn it down? He will know I am afraid. He will think he has won." "He will think he has won either way," I said. "But there is a third option." I did not sleep that night. I sat in my study, staring at the letter, turning it over and over in my hands. I thought of Lord Chun, his thin mustache, his flat eyes, his cold smile. I thought of his wife, Lady Zhao, who had given me the key to his secrets. I thought of the Empress Dowager's secretary, who owed me a debt of gratitude. And I thought of my son, Standing at the threshold of a future he had not chosen, by dawn, I had a plan. I wrote 3 letters. The first was to Lord Chin. I thanked him for his generous offer to my son. I told him I was honored by his attention. I told him I would consider the position carefully, and I would respond within the week. I sealed it with the plum blossom wax and sent it with a messenger. The second letter was to Lady Zhao. I did not ask her for anything. I simply wrote that I had been thinking of her, and I hoped she was well. I enclosed a small silk pouch embroidered with phoenixes, a gift for her personal use. I did not mention her husband. I did not mention the salt cartel. I simply offered a thread of connection. The third letter was the most dangerous. It was to the Empress Dowager's secretary. I wrote, Lord Chin has offered my son a position at the Imperial Academy. I suspect his motives are not pure. I have no proof, but I have a strong intuition. If you have any influence over the Academy's appointments, I would be grateful if you could ensure that my son's name is not on the final list of candidates. I do not want him to be caught in a web I have spun. I will be forever in your debt. I sent the letters and I waited. 3 days passed. Lord Chin did not respond. Lady Zhao sent a brief note of thanks, with no mention of her husband. And the Empress Dowager's secretary sent a single line, Your son's name is not on the list. I exhaled. The trap had been disarmed, but I knew Lord Chen would not stop. He had tried to use my son. He had failed, but he would try again. He would find another way to reach me, another weakness to exploit. I had to be ready. I had to be stronger. That I gathered my sons in the study that evening. All 7 of them, including Lu Yuan, who had become quieter but more settled in the months since his mother's death. I looked at them, each so different, each so precious. My eldest, steady and reliable. My second, the scholar, with his books and his fears. My third, the warrior, quick with his fists and quicker with his loyalty. My fourth, the artist who drew everything he saw. My fifth, the negotiator who could talk anyone into anything. My sixth, the dreamer who spent his days staring at clouds. And Lu Yuan, the smallest, the newest, the one who had come to us with nothing but fear and a wooden horse. Listen to me, I said. The world outside these walls is dangerous. There are men like Lord Chin who see us as tools or obstacles. There are people who will try to use you, to hurt you, to take what we have built. But we are the Phoenix Gate. We do not break.
We do not bow.
And we do not let fear decide our path. My second son stepped forward. Mother, he said, I have decided. I will not accept Lord Chen's offer. I will stay here and help you run the business. The academy can wait. My family cannot. I looked at him, and I felt a swell of pride so deep it made my chest ache. You are a better man than your father ever was, I said. And you will be a better man than Lord Chin will ever know. That night, I burned the letter from Lord Chin. I watched the flames consume the heavy paper, the gold seal, the careful script. I watched it turn to ash, and I thought, this is not the end. This is just another battle. And I will win the war. I went to bed with the windows open, letting the cool night air wash over me. I heard my sons' voices in the next room, laughing at something Lu Yuan had said. I heard the distant sound of the city, the murmur of life continuing beyond my walls. And I thought of Lady Zhao, trapped in her gilded cage. I thought of the Empress Dowager's secretary, balancing her debts and her favors. I thought of all the women who had no gate, no phoenix, no sons to protect them. I would not forget them. I would not stop fighting for them. Because the Phoenix Gate was not just a house. It was a promise that women could rise, could build, could survive. I slept deeply, without dreams, and in the morning, I began again. Autumn painted the capital in shades of gold and rust, and the Phoenix Gate's gardens blazed with chrysanthemums. I had planted them myself, in the spaces where Lady Lu's peonies had once grown. It felt right. Peonies were fragile, demanding. Chrysanthemums survived the frost. I liked that. The business had grown beyond my expectations. 3 workshops had become 7. 7 had become 12. The southern port contract was yielding more than I had ever dreamed, and the Empress Dowager's secretary had quietly ensured that my name appeared on several lucrative palace commissions. I was no longer just a merchant. I was a force, but forces attract opposition. And on the first day of the 9th month, I received a visitor I had not anticipated. Her name was Lady Jiang, and she was the wife of the Minister of Rights. She arrived in a carriage so ornate it seemed to glow, flanked by a dozen servants and a cloud of perfume. I had met her once, years ago, at a palace banquet where I had been seated near the back, invisible and silent. She had not spoken to me then. She had not even looked at me. Now she swept into my main hall like a general entering a conquered city. She did not wait for tea. She did not exchange pleasantries. She simply said, "Lady He, I have come to offer you a proposal." I gestured for her to sit. She did not. "I have heard of your success," she continued. "The silk trade, the palace commissions, the 6 sons who follow you like soldiers. You have done well for a woman without connections." "I have connections," I said mildly. "I have the Empress Dowager's favor. I have the loyalty of my merchants. I have my own hands." She smiled. It was a thin smile like a blade. "And I have the Minister of Rights. I have access to the Emperor's ear. I have the power to make your life very easy, or very difficult. I am offering you the former." I waited. "I want a partnership," she said. "Not in silk. In land. The northern provinces are being opened for settlement. The Emperor is offering parcels to loyal families. If we join forces, we can claim the best plots, control the grain trade, and become the wealthiest women in the capital. You have the capital. I have the connections. Together, we are unstoppable." It was tempting. Everything she said was true. The northern provinces were a gold mine, and the Minister of Rights controlled the allocation of land grants. If I refused, she could block me from ever obtaining a single acre. If I accepted, I would be tying myself to a woman I did not trust. "I need time to consider," I said. She nodded.
Take a week.
But no more. She swept out, leaving the scent of sandalwood and ambition in her wake. I sat alone in the hall, staring at the chrysanthemums through the window. I thought of Lord Chun, his thin mustache, his cold eyes. I thought of Lady Jiang, her thin smile, her impatient fingers. They were both predators, circling my gate, waiting for me to open it. But I had learned something in the years since the snow. I had learned that predators are predictable. They assume everyone else is just like them. Hungry, ruthless, willing to sacrifice anything for advantage. They cannot imagine a woman who builds instead of takes, who protects instead of devours. That I needed to see the northern lands for myself. I needed to know what I was being offered before I decided. I traveled north for 2 weeks, leaving my eldest in charge, with strict instructions to consult Master Wei, and no one else. I took my 3rd son, the warrior, and my 5th son, the negotiator. They were my eyes and my hands, sharp and clever. The northern provinces were a desolation. Fields of dry grass, crumbling villages, and the bones of old farms that had been abandoned during the last war. The land was cheap, but it was also empty. There were no farmers, no markets, no roads. It would take years and a fortune to make it productive. I returned to the capital with a clear answer. When Lady Jiang came calling at the end of the week, I was ready. "I cannot accept your proposal," I said. "The northern lands are too barren. It would take too long to make them profitable. I have other obligations." She stared at me, her smile gone. "You are making a mistake." "Perhaps," I said, "but it is my mistake to make." She left without another word. I knew she would not forget. I knew she would try to hurt me, somehow. But I had made my choice that night. I sat with my sons and told them everything. The offer, the journey, the refusal. They listened in silence, their faces thoughtful. My eldest spoke first. "Mother, you did the right thing. Lady Jiang is not a partner. She is a parasite. She would have drained you dry." My 3rd son nodded. "And the northern lands are a trap. They look like opportunity, but they are a prison. People who go there never come back." My 5th son, the negotiator, said, "But she will not stop. She will find another way to strike." "Let her," I said. I am ready, but I was not ready. Not really. 3 days later, I received a summons from the Ministry of Commerce. An investigation had been opened into my silk business. The charge? Tax evasion. I had paid every coin I owed, but the ministry had been informed, anonymously, that I had been underreporting my profits for years. It was a lie, but it was a lie that would take months to disprove. In the meantime, my workshops would be frozen. My shipments would be stopped. My business would bleed. I knew who had made the accusation. Lady Jiang, that I did not panic. I did not rage. I sat in my study and wrote a letter to the Empress Dowager's secretary, telling her what had happened. I did not ask for help. I simply informed her of the situation and waited. She replied within a day, "I will speak to the Minister of Commerce. He owes me a favor, but you need to give me something in return. A piece of evidence. A witness. Something that proves Lady Jiang is acting out of spite, not justice." I thought of Lady Zhao. I thought of Lord Chun. I thought of the second key, hidden in the hollow of a brush. I thought of all the secrets I had gathered, all the strings I had pulled, all the debts I had collected. I wrote a letter to Lady Zhao. I asked her if she knew anything about her husband's dealings with Lady Jiang. I did not ask directly. I simply said that I had heard rumors of a connection, and I was curious. She replied within 2 days. "They have been meeting in secret. Lord Chen and Lady Jiang are cousins. They have been planning something together. I do not know what, but I know they are afraid of you. That is all I can tell you." It was enough. I took the letter to the Empress Dowager's secretary. She read it, nodded, and said, "This will be sufficient. The Minister of Commerce will close the investigation. But Lady He, you are playing with fire. You have enemies on all sides. You cannot keep fighting every battle alone." I looked at her. I am not alone. I have my sons. I have my merchants. I have you. She smiled, and for the first time, I saw something like respect in her eyes. "Yes," she said. "You have me. But you need to make more allies. You need to build a network that will protect you even when I am gone." I knew she was right. I had been so focused on defending my gate that I had forgotten to build bridges. I had been so afraid of betrayal that I had closed myself off from the very people who could help me. That night, I began a new strategy. I wrote letters to every woman I had ever met, the wives of merchants, the daughters of ministers, the widows of fallen generals. I invited them to the Phoenix Gate for tea, for calligraphy, for poetry readings. I offered them friendship, not favors. I offered them community, not competition. Slowly, they came. They came because they had heard of my success. They came because they were lonely. They came because they wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. And I gave them that. I gave them a space where they could speak freely, where they could share their fears and their dreams, where they could build their own gates. Within a month, the Phoenix Gate had become more than a house. It was a haven, a sisterhood, a promise, and Lady Jiang, watching from the shadows, knew she had lost. Winter returned, and with it, the snow that had once marked the beginning of my awakening. I stood at the window of my study, watching the white flakes drift down, covering the chrysanthemums and the bare branches of the plum trees. 7 years had passed since that day. 7 years since I had stepped out of the sedan chair and into a new life. The Phoenix Gate had grown beyond anything I had imagined. The silk business stretched across 3 provinces, with workshops in the capital, the southern ports, and the eastern valleys. The alliances I had built with the women of the capital had turned into a quiet network of influence that reached into every ministry and every noble house. The Empress Dowager had passed, but her secretary had risen to a position of power, and she remembered my loyalty. Lady Zhao had left Lord Chen, come to live near the Phoenix Gate, and started her own small weaving business with my help. Lu Yuan had grown into a fine young man, studious and kind, and my 6 sons had all found their paths. The eldest now managed the family estates, the second had become a respected scholar on his own terms, the third had joined the Imperial Guards, the fourth had opened an art studio, the fifth had taken over the southern trade routes, and the sixth had followed his dreams to the far western mountains to study healing herbs. And my husband, the former Duke of Anping, had died quietly in his small house on the southern edge of the city. I had attended his funeral. I had stood at the back, watching the procession, feeling nothing but a distant ache that might have been pity. He had been a small man in the end, smaller than I had ever realized that I did not celebrate his death. I simply let it go, but the past is never truly past. It lingers like a half-remembered dream, waiting to return. And on the coldest night of that winter, a letter arrived that brought it all back. The letter was from Lady Lu. Not the Lady Lu who had died in the southern estate, but another Lady Lu, a younger cousin, who had been living in obscurity in a small village near the border. She wrote, "I have something that belongs to you, a document that your husband hid before his death. I found it among his belongings. It concerns the Onping estate. Please come." I did not trust her. I had learned not to trust anyone who wrote letters with vague promises. But I could not ignore it. The Onping estate was still a shadow over my son's future. If there was a document that could threaten them, I needed to know. I traveled to the border village with my eldest and my fifth son, leaving the others to guard the Phoenix Gate. The journey was long and cold, and the village was smaller than I had expected, a cluster of wooden huts surrounded by snow-covered fields. Lady Lu's cousin was a thin woman with tired eyes and a nervous smile. She met me at the door of her hut and pressed a rolled parchment into my hands. "I found it in a chest he left behind," she said. "I don't know what it means, but I thought you should have it." I unrolled the parchment. It was a deed, not to the Onping estate, but to a small piece of land in the mountains, where I had been born. The land had belonged to my father. He had sold it before I was born, or so I had always been told. But the deed was clear. The land had never been sold. It had been given to me, as a wedding gift, by my father himself. And my husband had hidden it, kept it from me, so that I would never know I had a birthplace to return to. I sat down heavily. He kept this from me. All these years I thought I had nothing. No home. No heritaje. No place to go back to. And he kept this. The cousin nodded. He was afraid. He told me once, when he was ill, that he had always feared you would leave him. So he took away your options. I looked at the deed. The ink was faded, the paper yellowed with age. But the words were clear. My father's name. My name. A small parcel of land in the hills where I had spent my earliest years, before I was sent to the capital to be married. I folded the parchment carefully and tucked it into my sleeve. "Thank you," I said to the cousin. "I will not forget this." I returned to the Phoenix Gate with a new sense of peace. The land was small, insignificant, but it was mine. It was the first thing I had truly owned, given to me by my father, hidden by my husband. And now I had it back, that I did not go to the mountains. I had no need to. The land was a symbol, not a destination. A reminder that I had always had roots, even when I thought I had none. That I gathered my sons in the study that night. All 7 of them, together. I looked at each face, the faces of the boys who had grown into men under my care. My eldest, steady and responsible. My second, thoughtful and wise. My third, bold and loyal. My fourth, creative and free. My fifth, sharp and ambitious. My sixth, gentle and curious. And Lu Yuan, who had become as much my son as any of them. "I want to tell you a story," I said. "It is a story about a woman who married a duke, bore 6 sons, and was forgotten. It is a story about snow and silk and salt. It is a story about a gate that never fell." They listened in silence as I spoke. I told them everything: the snow, the sedan chair, the jade bracelet, the grain accounts, the silk guild, the Empress Dowager's invitation, Lord Chun, Lady Jiang, Lady Zhao, the northern lands, the southern ports, the letters I had written and burned. When I finished, the fire in the brazier had burned low. The snow was falling outside, soft and relentless. My eldest spoke first. "Mother," he said, "you are the strongest person I have ever known." I shook my head. "I am not strong. I am just a woman who refused to be invisible. That is the only secret. Refuse to be invisible." My second son asked, "What happens now?" I looked around the study, the books, the scrolls, the inkstones. The embroidery on the walls, the phoenixes rising from the ashes, the 7 faces of my sons, young and eager and full of promise. Now, I said, we keep building. We keep growing. We keep creating a world where our children and their children can thrive. The Phoenix Gate is not just a house. It is an idea. And ideas do not die. I stood. I walked to the window and looked out at the snow. The same snow that had fallen on that day, 7 years ago. The same cold, the same white blanket covering the city. But I was not the same woman that I had started with nothing but a title and a cage. I had ended with everything, a fortune, a network, a family, a purpose. I had not forgiven my husband. I had not forgotten the pain. But I had moved beyond it, like a river flowing around a stone that I turned back to my sons. This is your legacy, I said. Not the silk, not the land, not the titles, but the knowledge that you can rise from nothing, that you can build something new out of broken pieces, that you can choose your own path. Lu Yuan stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but steady. Mother, you gave me a path. You gave me a family. You gave me a future. I will never forget it. I reached out and touched his shoulder. And you gave me a lesson about mercy, about choosing not to hate, about breaking cycles. The other sons gathered around me. They were not boys anymore. They were men. And they were mine. I looked at them and I thought, this is what I built. Not a business, not a fortune, not a reputation, but 7 sons who would go out into the world and make it better. The snow continued to fall. The fire crackled in the brazier. And I stood at the center of it all, the woman who had once knelt in the snow, invisible and forgotten, that I was not invisible anymore, that I was not forgotten, that I was the Phoenix Gate, and I would never bow. The snow fell through the night, and by morning, the city was a hush of white. I stood on the steps of the Phoenix Gate, my 7 sons arrayed behind me, and watched the sunrise bleed gold across the rooftops. The jade bracelet on my wrist caught the light, warm against my skin. I had not taken it off in 7 years. My eldest stepped forward. Mother, the memorial stone is ready. I nodded. We walked together to the eastern garden, where a smooth slab of granite had been placed beneath the old plum tree. On it, I had carved 3 lines. Here stood a woman who was forgotten. Here she rose. Here she built a gate that never falls. No name, no dates, no titles, just the truth. My sons gathered around as I knelt and pressed my palm to the cold stone. I thought of the girl I had been, the bride who believed love would save her. I thought of the woman I had become, the mother, the merchant, the builder. I thought of all the others who had walked through my gate and found shelter. Lady Zhao, Lu Yuan, the dozens of women who had come for tea and stayed for hope. I rose. I turned to my sons.
This is not an ending, I said.
This is a beginning. Every day, you will choose who you want to be. Every day, you will build something new. And when you are old, and the snow falls on your own gates, you will remember that you came from a woman who refused to kneel. Lu Yuan stepped forward and handed me a small wooden horse, the same one he had clutched as a frightened boy. I want you to keep this, he said, to remember that you saved me. I took the horse. It was worn and chipped, but I held it like treasure. Thank you, I said, for reminding me that mercy is not weakness. The sun rose higher. The snow began to melt. And I walked back into my house, surrounded by my sons, my future, my life. The Phoenix Gate stood behind me, solid and strong. It had seen snow and rain, spring and autumn, triumph and grief. It would see more, but it would never fall because I was the gate. And I had finally learned to stand.